A couple weeks into the offseason, I think it's fair to say there are more questions than answers about the Jets offense. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, the way these questions are answered could determine the fate of the 2025 Jets. Let's discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, March 24th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you, everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, on today's show, we're going to take a look at the Jets offense position by position to see where things stand a couple of weeks into free agency and a couple of weeks before the NFL draft. Now, this Jets offense is not a completed product. The team will, of course, draft players. Presumably, some of them will come on the offensive side of the ball. We could also see some more signings, but this seems like a good time to take stock of where the Jets are on offense. So today, we're going to go position by position. I'm going to have a very simple rating system. It's either going to be a green flag, a yellow flag, or a red flag. Green flag means we're good to go, no problems, everything's looking really good. Yellow flag means there's question marks. It means that essentially there's potential for it to be pretty good, but we can't be entirely certain. And there are questions we're going to have to delve into. And red flag means we got issues. So let's start at the quarterback position. I think that's a pretty clear yellow flag right now for the Jets, with Justin Fields set to be the team's starting quarterback in 2025. It seems like at this point, the team's going to hold on to Tyrod Taylor to be the backup. And then there will be a number 3 quarterback who likely will be a developmental guy. It could be Jordan Travis, who the Jets drafted in the late rounds last year. It's also conceivable the Jets draft a new developmental quarterback in the late rounds this year. It's always a bit of a tricky spot for a player who is the developmental quarterback of the previous regime. Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn don't really have anything invested in Jordan Travis. So, they could stick with him for another year, or they could draft their own developmental quarterback. But the focus is really on Fields. And we've discussed Fields a lot the last couple of weeks, and we're going to discuss Fields a lot between now and opening day because he is perhaps the most critical player on the team, which is no surprise because he plays the most important position on the field, the quarterback position. And Fields' career to date, it's pretty basic. He was a first-round pick. The Bears traded up to get him in 2021. And while there were some good moments, while there were some high points, they were not consistent enough. They did not come frequently enough. And Fields was sent to Pittsburgh last year for a late round pick where, because of an injury to Russell Wilson, he started the first handful of games, but was not effective enough for Mike Tomlin to stick with them. The Steelers eventually put in Russell Wilson, and Wilson started the rest of the season. Fields is, I think that what the Jets hope will be the next quarterback reclamation project in the NFL. And we've seen a lot of these in recent years. We've seen a lot of former Jets quarterbacks who were high picks who did not fare well with their first team, namely Geno Smith and Sam Darnold, go to another team and find success. And I've been critical, and I think NFL teams are getting this stuff wrong at the quarterback position. I always remembered like my dad telling me when he grew up watching the NFL. I mean, it would be years before a drafted quarterback would set foot on the field. And I used to think, that was maybe an outdated thing because it's easier to play quarterback now. The offenses are more sophisticated. The coaching's more sophisticated. The passing concepts are more sophisticated. The rules benefit the passing game. And I think maybe that's true to an extent. I mean, I do think there are definitely quarterbacks who are equipped to play, but I also think there are a lot of quarterbacks who would benefit from sitting not just 1 year, but a couple of years. But in today's NFL, where you have so much pressure on coaches to get immediate results, they don't really have the luxury of trying to develop a quarterback. So you're seeing increasingly, it feels like quarterbacks fail in their first stop because they don't really know how to play the game yet. They don't really know how to read a defense. They don't really understand NFL modern passing concepts because a lot of college offenses don't have progression passing reads consistently in their playbook. Defenses are more complicated in the NFL, and it's natural for things to take a few years to figure out. I mean, think about like a normal office. You will have people who will be great right off the bat. They will just take to a job like a fish to water. You have other people who, it doesn't matter. They could give them 20 years. They'd never figure it out. But there are also a lot of people who, maybe aren't great at their job when they start out, but after they get the hang of things, after a couple of years, they start to put the pieces together and they improve. I mean, I can tell you, I've been better at every job I've ever had on year five than I was in year one. And it's kind of funny because like the NFL is being a quarterback in the NFL is different from every other job in a lot of ways. But there are some ways where it's kind of similar that we don't really think about. And, that's among them. Nobody's ever questioned whether Fields has a lot of ability. He does. There's a reason he was drafted high in the first round. I mean, there's a reason the Jets considered him with the second overall pick that year in 2021. And of course, they eventually went with Zach Wilson. Fields is a guy with great physical toolkit. He's flashed the ability to have big passing games. This isn't a guy who's come to the NFL and completely failed as a passer. I mean, over 20% of the games, I wrote an article last week for GangGreenNation.com on this. Over 20% of the games where he's thrown 20 passes, he's had a passer rating of over 100. So, and that was similar to what Sam Darnold did heading into last season. There have been flashes of really high quality play from Fields as a passer, and that's not to speak of his abilities as a rusher. Now, what are the things Fields struggles with? His pocket presence is not great. He's not great at sliding within the pocket. He's not great at stepping up. He takes too many bad sacks. As I mentioned last week, you're going to see a difference in the Jets' pass protection stats this year. The Jets' pass protection stats will be worse, even if the quality of the pass protection remains the same. Because you're going from a quarterback who gets the ball out really quick in Aaron Rodgers to a quarterback who holds the ball in Justin Fields. Now, the trade-off for that is Justin Fields is a quarterback capable of hitting big passes. Fields traditionally during his time in Chicago was one of the most likely quarterbacks to throw the ball down the field. And that's an element the Jets were really lacking last year. And I think it's something that held the offense back quite a bit. And again, Fields' ability as a runner, it extends plays, it extends plays. Sometimes there are moments where like a lot of mobile quarterbacks where he holds the ball on for too long because he takes a sack. But the trade-off you hope is that he extends plays with his legs. And creates plays that other quarterbacks can't. It's a classic upside play for the New York Jets. There were not a lot of good options in front of them. And, I've somewhat praised the signing. I've been cautiously optimistic about the signing. Maybe that's the best way to put it, because I don't think Fields is like the greatest option in the world. He's just better than the other options that were in front of the New York Jets. I mean, I don't think there was another guy who, first of all, has a track record of somewhat solid play, but also has the upside to be better in the right system with the right coaching. And, you hope that the Jets will lean into the things Justin Fields does really well. You hope that they will utilize his abilities as a runner, because I really do think he's one of the few quarterbacks in the league who can be an impact runner. I think everybody's got to be a little mobile in today's NFL. I mean, I think the day of the statuesque pocket passers going, but there's a difference between a guy who with mobility to extend plays and a guy who can actually really make a dent in a defense with his rushing ability, a guy you can call designed runs for. Fields is the latter. And he's got abilities as a passer. He's got the ability to make big plays, to extend plays with his legs and push the ball down the field. If he can find a higher level of consistency, which is something you'd hope he'll find entering year 5. It takes some guys some time to develop. So big question marks around Justin Fields. It will have a big impact on the success or failure of the 2025 New York Jets. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll start turning our attention to the skill positions. And I think in the skill spots, there's one position where Jets should be feeling pretty good, where the group is loaded with young talent, and a couple other spots where things are looking a little bleak. Let's dive into what the Jets need to do at the skill positions as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check out your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, shopping online, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you'll realize just how much you're spending on food delivery. Now you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check all your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track even shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. You may have your eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something to get excited to bet on, and the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. Heading into Sweet 16 weekend, maybe if you're a local fan, you're less excited because of what happened with St. John's, but maybe you didn't go to St. John's. Maybe you went to another school across the country. Maybe your team's still in it. FanDuel's the place to get in on the action. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on those college hoops action all tournament long. Again, FanDuel.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. Today we're taking stock of the Jets on the offensive side of the ball. We're a couple of weeks into free agency, so we have a good sense of what the roster is starting to shape up to look like, but there still will be changes. Inevitably, the Jets will sign other players. Some of these will be smaller ticket moves, but Jets will sign players. They also will likely draft players on the offensive side of the ball. I can't imagine the Jets are only going to draft defensive players, but it's good to take stock of where they are right now to get a sense of where the question marks are and where the Jets need help. Now let's talk about the running back position. To me, this is like I'm using the red flag, yellow flag, green flag system. Red flag means we were in big trouble. Green flag means we're A-okay, and yellow flag means somewhere between where it could pan out, but we got question marks. Running back's the one spot on offense right now where I'd go with a green flag. You've got a very talented, dynamic starter in Breece Hall, who entering the fourth season of his career. And while, there have been ups and downs, and while Breece is a bit too feast or famine for a lot of people's tastes, very dynamic player, a real home run hitter. I mean, maybe the only home run hitter the Jets have on the offensive side of the ball. And then a couple of other talented young backs, Braylon Allen, who, to be honest with you, I was a little disappointed in the way Braylon Allen ended the season last year, because he looked like a real pro back the first month or so of the season. And for the first 4 or 5 games, he was kind of outproducing Breece Hall. And I remember there was one point where I said that Braylon Allen should have taken over the number one lead back role, at least temporarily. And I remember, I think it was after the Denver game, week 4, where I mentioned that, Breece Hall is a talented back, and I expected there to be a point in the season where Breece Hall would reclaim the number one back role. But through the first month, Braylon Allen was outproducing him. And then things just kind of fell off for Braylon Allen. I mean, he was still pretty effective in short yardage situations, but not so much other than that, which was a bit disappointing, but still a guy who flashed an ability to be a quality NFL back as a tough runner. And then Isaiah Davis, who started to get some opportunities late in the season, and in those limited opportunities looked pretty good. I've been saying for a while, running back's a young man's position. And, maybe the pendulum's changing on that a little bit, because you look across the league at what some of the big free agent signings did last year. You want to talk Saquon Barkley with the Eagles, which, will go down undoubtedly as one of the great free agent signings of all time. But also, if you could talk about Derrick Henry with Baltimore, you could talk Josh Jacobs. Maybe we're starting to see a little bit of a revival in veteran running backs in the league. And sometimes the pendulum swings a little bit too far. Maybe we've swung a little bit too far against veteran running backs and giving them second contracts. But I still think running back is a young man's position in this league. Jets have a very good starter and then 2 guys behind him with potential. So I think the running back position is clearly a green flag one for the New York Jets. I can't say the same thing about the wide receiver position. Wide receiver position for me gets the first red flag. Now, here's the thing about wide receivers that we kind of have to go in a little deeper, because if we were going player by player, the first player would be a green flag player in Garrett Wilson. And, one of the things that I want to emphasize is the Jets are not where they were, say, in 2021 or in 2019 or, in 2017, where they lacked a number one receiver. having a number one receiver is a big deal. And the Jets certainly have that in Garrett Wilson, a player who has 3,000-yard seasons in 3 years. And in none of the 3 years did he have particularly good quarterback play. So he's a guy you build around. And my hope is certainly that now that he's eligible for a contract extension, the Jets will work something out long term with him. Maybe after the draft. There's still some business to conduct. Jets have to get through their team meetings. Jets have to set up their draft board. There's still maybe a couple players to be signed. So there's no rush on this. Garrett's not going to be a free agent for another 2 years, assuming the Jets pick up his fifth-year option, which they certainly will do. But this is a guy you want in a Jets uniform for a really long time. And we know Garrett was a little frustrated with the way things went with Rodgers and Devontae Adams this year. But with those guys gone, with a new coaching staff in here, hopefully that will make Garrett amenable to being a Jets receiver for a very long time. The problem is after we get past Garrett Wilson, there's not a whole lot. I mean, still Allen Lazard's on the team. I don't know when Lazard's going to be cut. I would not expect him to be on the team at the start of next season, just because he's nowhere near worth the money the Jets are paying him. And is he better than the other guys? I guess he's better than Xavier Gipson, but I actually don't have a ton of conviction on that one. I think the only real skill Lazard had was playing experience playing with Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers sometimes likes his receivers to improvise. So the one thing Lazard could do was figure out what soft spot in the defense Aaron Rodgers wanted him to get to on an improvised play. But after that, I mean, he's not been good. He really is just not. I mean, he has no plus attributes to the table. He's a big receiver, but he plays small. I mean, he's not a guy who wins contested catches. He's not a guy who shows strong hands at the point of the catch when someone's trying to break up the pass. He drops too many easy ones. He's not fast. He's not quick. There's nothing he really adds to the table. And once you get past him, and then we're just talking guys like Xavier Gipson and Malachi Corley. And, Gipson deserves respect on some level. Undrafted free agent who's impressed a coaching staff enough to make a team. But he's not really a guy who adds a whole lot. Xavier Gipson will probably live on the Jets lore for that touchdown return against Buffalo opening night in the game Rodgers got injured in 2023. But aside from that, he doesn't really bring much to the table. And Corley is frankly just a huge project. He was a project the day the Jets drafted him. He was a project the day the Jets traded up for him. I think that was a classic case of Joe Douglas, being the super scout, thinking he found a guy with attributes that nobody else could find, and the Jets aggressively tried to trade up. I mean, the Jets traded at the top of the third round, but by all accounts, they were trading to trade up high into the second round to get Corley, who ended up lasting all the way to pick 65. And who knows how much longer he would have fallen if the Jets hadn't traded up for him. A guy who's just look, if you get something out of Corley, you're happy, but that's not something you can count on right now. And unfortunately, where the Jets are right now, they're kind of back to where they've been the last couple of years, where everything's got to run through Garrett Wilson, because there's really nobody else you can rely on to get open. The only time that Garrett Wilson's had a quality complement, it was a player who made no sense for the Jets, a player who the cost was just crazy, and that was Adams, and a player who the quarterback was obsessed with force feeding the ball at the expense of Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson's never really had a proper complement to him. And the only guy who's even been a quality receiver was Adams, who had all sorts of issues. When you talk about what the Jets paid to get him, and when you talk about how Rodgers kind of at times focused on Adams at the expense of moving the ball. Jets have to figure out a way to find help at the receiver position, because it is a premium position, and it's a spot where they're just not very good right now. After Garrett Wilson, of course. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the trenches. A very interesting dynamic in the trenches, where the Jets are maybe like one player away from me feeling really good about them, but I almost feel better about their backups than I do their starters. Let's delve into why as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. Today, we're taking stock of where the Jets currently stand on the offensive side of the ball. Still some offseason left to go, so things certainly could change, but this is a good point to kind of give a progress report, because we're pretty deep into free agency. The draft is still in front of us. We figure out where the Jets need help. Let's turn our attention to the offensive line. And we've been using the green flag, yellow flag, red flag system. I'm putting this as a yellow flag because for the first time in a while, I think we can feel relatively good about 4 of the 5 spots on the offensive line. We haven't seen Olu Fashanu play a full 17-game season yet, but for a young guy who started the season seeming like he needed some development, he really kind of came on around the end of the year after Tyron Smith got injured in a November game against the Arizona Cardinals. This is what put Fashanu into the starting lineup. And I thought he held up very well from that point forward until he unfortunately suffered an injury late in the season that cost him the last couple of games. John Simpson, very solid signing from the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Tippmann, I think, really took to the center position in year 2 after bouncing between guard and center in year 1. And after year 1, I wasn't entirely convinced Tippmann was better off at center than guard. Now I'm feeling pretty good with Tippmann at center. And then Elijah Vera Tucker, Jets finally keep him at one position, and he finally stays relatively healthy and has a good season. Really, the big question mark is the right tackle spot. And that's an important question mark. That's a spot the Jets really need to figure out because that's where a lot of the top pass rushers line up. And the Jets don't really have anybody to play right tackle right now. And there aren't really a lot of great options available. I mean, do the Jets go in that direction in the draft? I don't think it would be the worst move. I mean, I think that it's not a bad idea to invest heavily in the offensive line in the draft because quality players don't really shake free in free agency up front anymore. There just aren't enough good offensive linemen to go around in the league at this point. So I don't think you can. I don't think it's a bad idea to consistently invest early round draft picks on the offensive line because it's very difficult to find guys otherwise. Anybody good sticks with their original team signed them. Here's the tricky thing with the Jets, though, is that I actually like some of the depth moves that they made. I mean, they did get a guy with decent starting experience at tackle in Chukwuma Okorafor, who hasn't been great the last 2 years, and some unusual stuff happened last year in New England where he was benched after 12 snaps and then left the team. But as an upside play, a guy with 3.5 years of starting experience, and not just 3.5 years of starting experience, but 3.5 years of starting experience, where for the most part he wasn't great, but he wasn't a disaster. I mean, that's pretty good. And then I think you could say the same thing about Josh Myers at center. If the Jets get a real right tackle in here, this offensive line is actually shaping up to be pretty good and pretty deep. It's maybe not a top 5 offensive line, but it's the type of offensive line you can feel pretty good about putting out on a week-to-week basis. One of the things we've seen with the Jets over the last couple of years is they've put a lot of bad offensive lines on the field. They put some offensive lines on the field that just gave them really no chance to compete. The Jets, if they figure out the right tackle spot, they're going to have a chance to compete on the offensive side of the ball, and it'll make a big impact on this season for the team. And then we can end by talking about the tight end position. And this is a red flag right now. Now, the only good thing I can say about the tight end position is that it's not that important. There are certain spots where if you have a guy who can't play, it sinks your offense. If you have a tackle who can't play, it sinks your offense. You have a quarterback who can't play, it sinks your offense. You have a tight end who can't play. I mean, you can work around that. But in case you missed it, late last week, the Jets lost their starting tight end. Tyler Conklin signs with the Chargers on a 1-year contract, and it was a cheap 1-year contract. The type of contract I almost wonder why the Jets did not match it. And I think the Jets might be playing the compensatory pick game a bit. Going back to what I said, tight end position isn't that important. I mean, look, if you have a really good tight end, it can take your offense to the next level. But a bad tight end's usually not going to be enough to sink your offense. I mean, look, if you go back to any random Locked On Jets episode, there's odds are you'll hear me ranting about Ryan Griffin and how bad he was back when he was with the Jets. But the reality is the Jets offense had bigger issues than Ryan Griffin when he was here, even though he wasn't, he really wasn't that great of a tight end. I wonder, I felt like Conklin was well worth the money the Chargers gave him, but overthecap.com projects that will provide the Jets an extra 7th round pick in next year's draft. And the 7th round pick isn't much, but you know what? The more late round picks you have, the better chance you have of hitting on one of them. And I think in a year where the Jets are going to have big holes anyway, in a year where Jets are going to try and compete, but the Jets probably aren't going to be a Super Bowl team, it may not be the worst idea in the world to let a guy like Conklin go and get a draft pick in return. Because right now, according to overthecap.com, the Jets are in line to get 2 compensatory picks in 2026. One would be a 4th-round pick for Hassan Reddick, and one would be a 7th-round pick for Tyler Conklin. And, 2 extra draft picks, it's not exciting, especially day 3 picks, but there are types of things where the more extra picks you add, the better off you are. I mean, if you look historically across the league, the teams that draft the best tend to be the teams that have the most picks. The ability of front offices to one front office versus another to identify talent in the draft, the gap really isn't that big. It's just more about giving yourself extra options, extra opportunities to find a player. So that comes with a cost, though, is that the Jets don't really have a starting tight end at the moment. And right now, the guy who's in line to start, Jeremy Ruckert, has been nothing if not a massive disappointment. A guy who, if we're going to be honest, has looked worse as a pro than he did in college. There was a reason the Jets drafted him in the 3rd round. He looked like a legitimate prospect in college. And in the NFL, I mean, he struggles to make catches. He struggles to execute blocks. I mean, the one thing with Ruckert is that, he has some highlight reel blocks. When he latches onto a guy, he really latches onto them, and he can move people. But generally speaking, Ruckert is very inconsistent with his technique blocking, and it really has not provided the Jets a whole lot as a pass catcher. And I don't think the starting tight end for the Jets is on the team right now. There's all this buzz about Tyler Warren out of Penn State potentially being the 7th overall pick. We'll see about that. I'm not totally convinced on that. I don't think it would be a good idea, but tight end's a spot where the Jets are certainly going to have to look to upgrade, because right now Ruckert's the starter, and Ruckert really hasn't shown he can be a quality backup in this league. So the only good thing you can say about the tight end position is that it's not that important. It's not the type of thing. It's not the type of thing where a bad one sinks your offense. Now, good ones takes your offense to the next level, but the bad one doesn't sink your offense. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.